The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched wide beneath a dome of living crystal, and within its curved walls sat the representatives of 12 elder species who had ruled the stars for thousands of years, before humanity ever looked up at the night sky and wondered what lay beyond their small blue world. Counselor Thexol of the Dominion adjusted his ceremonial robes and watched the human delegation enter through the eastern archway. And he felt that familiar mixture of confusion and mild contempt that humans always seemed to inspire in him. 3 years had passed since humanity had been granted provisional membership in the galactic community, and in that time, Thexol had observed them with the careful attention of a predator studying something it could not quite classify. They were strange creatures. These humans, Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked at the head of her delegation with that perpetual smile on her face. The same smile she wore when negotiating trade agreements. The same smile she wore when other species insulted her world. The same smile she wore no matter what indignities were heaped upon her kind. Thexol remembered the incident 6 months ago when the Velthari ambassador had spat directly in her face during a heated debate over mining rights in the outer territories. Any other species would have demanded satisfaction, would have called for sanctions, would have at minimum walked out of the chamber in righteous fury. Elena Vasquez had simply wiped the saliva from her cheek with a cloth, smiled that unchanging smile, and asked if they could continue the discussion. In a more productive manner, the Velthari had laughed at her. And truthfully, Thexol had laughed too, though he had hidden it behind his ceremonial mask. What kind of species allowed such disrespect and simply absorbed it like water into sand? The Rithian matriarch, ancient and terrible in her flowing gowns of woven starlight, leaned toward Thexol and spoke in the clicking language of her people that his translator rendered into words he could understand. "They are prey animals," she said with absolute certainty in her voice. "They have the look of creatures that evolved running from predators rather than hunting them. And somehow they stumbled into space travel through pure accident." Thexol considered this theory and found it compelling. Humans were soft and slow compared to most spacefaring species. They had no natural weapons like claws or venomous fangs. Their senses were mediocre at best, and their bodies broke so easily when damaged. Yet here they were among the stars, smiling and nodding and agreeing to unfavorable treaties that any self-respecting species would have rejected outright. High Arbiter Vaughn of the Judicial Assembly had found them useful for exactly this reason, and he made no secret of his opinion that humans serve best as buffer states and diplomatic servants. They volunteer for the assignments no one else wants. Vaughn had explained at a private gathering of council elders just last month. They send their people into war zones to deliver aid. They mediate disputes between species that have hated each other for millennia. They absorb the thankless work of civilization and never complain. But why? Thexol had asked with genuine confusion. Van had simply shrugged his massive shoulders and replied that perhaps humans were simply too stupid to know they were being taken advantage of. The council had agreed that this was the most likely explanation now. Thexol watched as Ambassador Vasquez took her seat in the human section of the chamber, a small alcove near the back that reflected humanity's junior status among the elder races. She was speaking quietly with her aides, reviewing documents on a tablet device, and occasionally looking up to offer polite nods to other delegations who passed by her seat. Most ignored her entirely, and she did not seem bothered by this in the slightest. Thexol turned his attention to the day's agenda and pushed thoughts of the strange humans from his mind. There were more important matters to discuss, such as the ongoing tensions with the Kreth hegemony, a younger species not yet represented on the council, but growing in power and aggression with each passing cycle. The Kreth were everything humans were not: fierce, proud, quick to anger and quicker to violence. They had been pushing boundaries for months now, testing the limits of council patience with border skirmishes and veiled threats and cargo ships that mysteriously disappeared in their space. Several council members wanted to take action, but the political complications were immense, and no one wanted to commit their own fleets to what might become a prolonged conflict, as if summoned by the exiles' thoughts. The main view screen flickered to life with an incoming transmission marked as urgent priority. The seal of the Kreth hegemony blazed across the display, and a cold silence fell over the chamber. Every species knew that urgent transmissions from the Kreth rarely contained good news. The exile noticed that Ambassador Vasquez had looked up from her documents with a slight frown on her face, and he wondered briefly what she was thinking behind those soft human eyes. He would learn the answer to that question very soon, and it would change everything he thought he understood about the smiling creatures from the small blue world. But for now, the transmission began to play, and the voice of a Kreth commander filled the chamber with words that would set the pose, that would set the play. And the voice of a Kreth commander filled the chamber with words that would set the changelings began to play. Galaxy on fire. None of them knew that humanity had been waiting for this moment, not with anticipation, but with a kind of tired resignation. None of them understood that humans smiled so much because the alternative was so much worse, and none of them realized that the gentle giants they had dismissed and mocked and exploited for 3 long years had been holding themselves back the entire time, keeping something locked away behind those warm eyes and soft voices, something old and dark and patient. The leash was about to slip, and the galaxy was about to learn why humans had put it on themselves in the first place. The transmission from the Kreth hegemony played across every screen in the council chamber, and what it showed made even the most hardened warriors among the elder species shift uncomfortably in their seats. Kepler 442b had been a quiet human agricultural colony on the edge of contested space, home to 12,000 civilians who grew crops and raised families and lived peaceful lives far from the politics of the galactic core. The Kreth had taken it in a single night. Fire filled the screen as the recording showed human cities burning under orbital bombardment, and the audio captured screams and explosions and the harsh laughter of Kreth soldiers as they marched through the rubble. Facts all watched with cold detachment as human survivors were dragged from their hiding places and forced to their knees in long lines, their hands bound behind their backs and their faces streaked with tears, and ash. Children were being separated from their parents and loaded onto transport ships with the brutal efficiency of a slaving operation, which is exactly what this was. The Kreth commander stepped in front of the camera with a grin that showed all of his serrated teeth, and he spread his arms wide as if embracing the destruction behind him. "Citizens of the Galactic Council," he announced in a voice dripping with contempt, "we send you this message as a demonstration of Kreth strength and human weakness." He gestured at the burning colony and laughed. These soft creatures could not even defend a single farming world, and yet they sit among you as equals? They are nothing but prey animals pretending to be civilized, and we have proven it today. The commander leaned closer to the camera with cruel amusement dancing in his eyes. "We know what you call them in your private chambers. We know you mock them and dismiss them and use them as servants for tasks beneath your dignity. And we want you to know that we agree completely." He straightened and clasped his hands behind his back in a mockery of diplomatic posture. Humanity is the galaxy's favorite punching bag, and today the Kreth hegemony has thrown our punch. So what will you do about it? What will the humans do about it? We already know the answer. Nothing. Because they are weak. Because they have always been weak. Because weakness is all they know. The transmission ended with the Kreth seal burning bright before fading to black. Silence filled the council chamber. Thick and heavy and uncomfortable. Earth looked around at his fellow counselors and saw various expressions of disgust and concern and calculated interest. But mostly he saw relief that it had not been their colonies targeted by Kreth aggression. This was humanity's problem to deal with. Not theirs, he turned his attention to the human delegation and felt a small shock run through his body when he saw Ambassador Vasquez. She sat perfectly still in her chair with a tablet device clutched in her hands, and she was watching a smaller version of the same transmission on her personal screen. Thex all could not see her face clearly from his position, but something about her posture had changed in a way he could not quite identify. The Rithian matriarch noticed it too, and called out across the chamber in a voice that carried easily through the vast space. Ambassador Vasquez, we have all witnessed this unfortunate transmission, and the Council offers its condolences for your losses, though of course we cannot take direct action against the Kreth without a formal vote and proper deliberation. Elena Vasquez did not respond immediately. She continued staring at her screen for several long seconds while the chamber waited in awkward silence. Then slowly, very slowly, she raised her head and looked at the matriarch. Thex or felt his breath catch in his throat. The smile was still there on her face, the same smile she always wore, but something behind it had changed completely, like looking at a fire that had suddenly gone cold without losing any of its light. Her eyes were the wrong kind of empty, not sad or shocked or grieving, but simply absent of something that had been there before. Ambassador Vasquez? The matriarch asked with a hint of uncertainty entering her ancient voice. Is something wrong? Elena stood from her seat with movements that were smooth and controlled and somehow deeply unsettling. The Kreth just made a mistake, she said in a voice so soft and calm that Dexal had to strain to hear it. She gathered her documents and nodded politely to the council members around her. I apologize, but I must excuse myself to attend to this matter, and I thank you for your understanding during this difficult time. She walked out of the chamber without waiting for a response, and her delegation followed in perfect silence. Thexel watched her go, with a strange feeling growing in his chest that he could not name. High Arbiter Vaughn snorted dismissively and waved one massive hand. There go the humans to file protests and write strongly worded letters, and in 6 months they will accept some meaningless apology from the Kreth and pretend this never happened. The Rithian matriarch clicked her agreement and added that humans lacked the spine to do anything more substantial. The council returned to its regular business with the human situation relegated to a minor footnote, but Dexal could not shake the image of Elena's eyes from his mind. That cold emptiness where warmth had been just moments before. Something was wrong. Something was different. Something had shifted in a way he did not understand within the hour. Reports began arriving from across the galaxy that every human diplomat had gone silent simultaneously. No responses to communications, no appearances at scheduled meetings, no explanation of any kind. The human embassies remained open, but staffed only by automated systems that repeated the same message over and over. Human diplomatic services are temporarily suspended. We apologize for any inconvenience. Vexal felt the strange feeling in his chest grow stronger as he realized that he had never seen humans coordinate anything so quickly or so completely for a species that seemed so disorganized and soft and accommodating. This sudden unified silence was deeply out of character. Unless, he thought with growing unease, they had been wrong about human character all along. Unless the softness was not who they were, but simply what they had chosen to show the Kreth commander had called humanity the galaxy's favorite punching bag. But Dexal was beginning to wonder if that punching bag had been holding something back, something that was no longer being held. 3 days passed in strange and uncomfortable silence. The council sent message after message to human space and received nothing but automated responses. And the elder species who had grown accustomed to human availability found themselves unsettled by this sudden absence. Thex all spent those 3 days gathering intelligence from every source he could access. And what he learned made him increasingly afraid in ways he did not fully understand. Human civilians had begun quietly leaving mixed species stations across the galaxy, packing their belongings and departing without explanation or farewell. Human businesses that had operated in alien markets for years were closing their doors and transferring their assets back to human-controlled territory. Human aid workers who had served in war zones and disaster areas were being recalled to their homeworld, leaving projects unfinished and recipients confused. It was as if humanity was pulling itself back from the galaxy like a tide withdrawing from a beach before a great wave. Then came the military reports. The Vulturi Admiral Koss, a warrior who had fought in 17 interstellar conflicts, requested an emergency audience with the Council to share intelligence about human fleet movements. They have reorganized their border forces, he announced to the assembled counselors, with a troubled expression on his scarred face. And I do not understand what I am seeing. He displayed a tactical map showing the positions of human warships along the border with Kreth space. 3 days ago, these vessels were spread in standard defensive formations. The same formations humans have used since they first developed faster-than-light travel. Patterns we considered adequate but unremarkable. He pressed a control, and the display updated to show current positions. Now they have shifted into something else entirely. Something I have never seen before. Something that makes no tactical sense according to any doctrine I was ever taught. The Rithian matriarch studied the formation with her many eyes and asked what the admiral believed it meant. Koss hesitated before answering, and Dexal noticed that the old warrior's hands were trembling slightly. In ancient Velthari military texts, there is a theoretical formation called the extinction configuration, a pattern designed not to win battles, but to completely eliminate an enemy species from existence. And it was considered so monstrous that it was never actually used in our entire recorded history. He pointed at the human fleet positions with a claw that shook visibly. This is not exactly that formation, but it shares the same basic principles, the same underlying logic, the same terrible purpose. And I want to know who taught humans to think this way. The chamber fell silent as the implication sank in high arbiter. Vaughn broke the quiet with forced confidence in his voice. Surely you are overreacting. Admiral, the humans have never shown any capacity for this kind of strategic thinking. They are farmers and diplomats and aid workers, not conquerors. Before Koss could respond, a new transmission overrode the Council's communication systems with priority codes that should have been impossible for anyone outside the chamber to access. The seal that appeared was not Kreth, but human. A simple blue circle containing the image of their homeworld. A human male appeared on screen. Older than Ambassador Vasquez, with gray hair cut short and a face marked by scars that spoke of violence, survived. Wore a uniform that none of the council members recognized. Plain and dark and utterly without decoration. My name is General Marcus Stone, he said in a voice that was calm and flat and empty of emotion. And I am addressing this message to the Kreth hegemony, though I expect others are listening as well. He did not smile, did not posture, did not raise his voice even slightly. 3 days ago, you attacked a human colony and took 12,000 of our civilians as slaves. And you broadcast this action to the galaxy as a demonstration of your strength and our weakness. Stone paused and looked directly into the camera, with eyes that reminded Dexal of Ambassador Vasquez in that terrible moment when she had received the transmission code. And empty and patient. I am not here to threaten you or to negotiate with you or to ask anything of you, because threats and negotiations and requests are tools of diplomacy, and diplomacy is no longer what this is. He pressed a control and data began scrolling beside his image. Ship names, fleet positions, defense grid specifications, supply line schedules. This is your military infrastructure. Stone continued without emotion. We know where every ship is stationed. We know the response time of every defense platform. We know the patrol routes of every border guard and the access codes of every communication satellite. The Kreth hegemony's entire military apparatus was displayed in perfect detail. You have 16 hours to return our people unharmed. And after that time has passed, we will no longer be operating under civil parameters. And I want to be clear about what that means. Stone leaned forward. Slightly. We have spent 3 years among you smiling and nodding and compromising because that is the way we choose to interact with civilized beings. But you have demonstrated that you are not civilized. And so we will interact with you differently. He straightened again. This is not a negotiation because there is nothing to negotiate. This is not a threat because we do not make threats. This is simply a courtesy notification of what is about to happen. And you have 16 hours to change the outcome. The transmission ended. Silence gripped the council chamber until High Arbiter Vaughn laughed nervously and declared that the humans were bluffing. They have never won a war in their entire history of galactic contact, he said with forced certainty. They are trying to scare the Kreth into compliance because they lack the strength to actually fight. Vexal wanted to believe him, but he remembered Elena's empty eyes and the Admiral's trembling hands and the way humanity had vanished from the galaxy like a tide pulling back, and he counted the hours until the deadline passed. 15 hours and 58 minutes later. Every orbital defense platform in the Kreth home system went dark simultaneously. No one detected the ships that did it. The Council finally understood that they had never really known humanity at all. The war lasted 11 days. Thuxhall would remember every one of those days for the rest of his life. Not because of the violence, but because of the silence. The terrible patient silence with which humanity dismantled the Kreth hegemony piece by piece on. The first day, the Council demanded human representatives attend an emergency session to explain themselves and received no response at all. On the second day, they sent formal protests and warnings about the consequences of unauthorized military action and received nothing but that same automated message about diplomatic services being temporarily suspended. By the third day, they stopped sending messages and simply watched. The war did not look like any conflict the elder species had ever witnessed. There were no grand fleet battles with ships exchanging fire across the void. No orbital bombardments reducing cities to ash. No armies clashing on planetary surfaces in displays of martial glory. Instead, there was simply Kreth power grids began shutting down across their territory, as if some invisible hand was switching off lights in a vast dark house. And no matter what their engineers tried, they could not restore function to systems that had worked perfectly for generations. Communication networks collapsed next, cutting off military units from their commanders and isolating worlds from each other in a spreading silence that felt almost deliberate in its cruelty. Warships launched to defend the Vend hegemony found their navigation systems corrupted by code that should not have been able to penetrate their security, sending them drifting off course or flying in circles or simply stopping dead in space. With all systems locked, some ships experienced worse failures. Airlocks cycling open without command. Life support systems shutting down in critical sections. Weapon systems activating and firing on allied vessels before deactivating just as mysteriously. The Kreth military was destroying itself. And no one could explain how. Admiral Koss provided analysis to the Council each day with an expression of horrified fascination on his face. They are not using weapons in any traditional sense, he reported on day 4. They have somehow infiltrated every digital system the Kreth possess and turned their own infrastructure against them. And I do not understand how this is possible because the Kreth use 17 different operating systems across their military and civilian sectors, and no single attack should be able to compromise all of them. He pulled up footage captured by a Kreth security drone. Moments before it too went dark human. Soldiers moved through a military installation with a speed and precision that made Koss's voice catch. In his throat, "These are not the humans we know," he said quietly. "These soldiers move like predators. They clear rooms in seconds. They anticipate enemy positions before those positions are revealed. They kill with an efficiency that suggests generations of practice." The footage showed a squad of 8 humans eliminating a Kreth defensive position of 30 soldiers in under 2 minutes. They did not speak or shout or hesitate even once. The Kreth have numbers and ferocity and the falsity and the falsum advantage of defending their own territory. Koss continued, "But it does not matter because these humans fight as if they have done this 1,000 times before. As if war is not something new to them, but something they have simply chosen not to do until now." By day 8, the Kreth government had collapsed. Entirely military commanders, who had sworn to fight to the last soldier, were surrendering without conditions. Some of them weeping as they handed over their weapons, others simply staring at nothing, with the blank expressions of those whose understanding of reality has been shattered. By day 10, the surrender was complete, and human ships held orbit above every Kreth world, but they did not bombard or occupy or demand territory. Instead, they systematically dismantled every weapons facility, every shipyard, every military academy, every research station that might one day produce new instruments of war. They worked with mechanical precision. Teams of engineers and demolition experts moving across the hegemony's infrastructure and reducing it to scrap. And through it all, they never spoke to the watching council or explained their actions or responded to any communication. On day 11, the 12,000 colonists from Kepler 442b were recovered and returned to human space. The Kreth slavers who had taken them were not among the prisoners processed after the surrender. Thex asked Admiral Koss what had happened to them, and received only a long silence before the old warrior replied that some questions were better left unasked. Throughout those 11 days, Thexal noticed something that disturbed him more than the violence itself. The humans never celebrated, never gloated, never raised their voices in victory or anger. They worked with the calm focus of surgeons removing a tumor, unpleasant but necessary, and when the work was done, they simply stopped. There was no joy in what they had accomplished, no satisfaction in the destruction they had caused. There was only a terrible weariness, as if this was something they had hoped never to do again. Thex all finally understood what civil mode meant. It was not weakness or stupidity or the natural behavior of prey animals. It was a cage that humans had built around themselves, a set of rules and restraints designed to keep something dangerous contained. And for 3 years, the galaxy had mocked them for living inside that cage, without ever wondering what the cage was built to hold. The Kreth had opened the door, and now everyone knew what lived on the other side. On the 12th day, the human fleets withdrew to their own territory, and diplomatic services resumed as if nothing had happened. Ambassador Elena Vasquez sent a polite message to the council expressing hope that normal relations could continue. She was smiling. In the attached image, Thex looked at that smile and felt a fear he had never known before. Not of what humans had done, but of what they had chosen not to do. Because if they could dismantle a spacefaring civilization in 11 days when provoked, what might they accomplish if they ever decided to stop being civil permanently? He suspected he did not want to know the answer. 3 weeks after the Kreth incident, as it came to be known in official records, Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked back into the Fenwis council chamber through the same eastern archway she had used for 3 years. She wore the same diplomatic attire she had always worn. She smiled the same warm smile she had always smiled. She greeted the representatives of the 12 elder species with the same polite courtesy she had always shown, and every single being in that chamber felt a cold terror run through them at the sight of Herthex Al watched her approach the human delegation's alcove and noticed that no one blocked her path or delayed her movement, that other diplomats actually stepped aside when they saw her coming, that eyes dropped to the floor rather than meet her gaze. The Velthari ambassador, who had once spat in her face, now pressed himself against the wall as she passed, and his skin had gone pale with fear. Elena pretended not to notice any of this. She took her seat and arranged her documents and behaved exactly as she had always behaved, as if the last month had been nothing more than an extended vacation. But the chamber was different now. The whispered jokes about human weakness had stopped, the dismissive comments about prey animals had vanished, the casual disrespect that had marked every interaction with humanity for 3 years had been replaced by something that looked almost like reverence. The Rithian matriarch was the first to speak directly to Elena, and Vexal noticed that the ancient creature's voice carried none of its usual arrogance. "Ambassador Vasquez," she said carefully, "we are pleased to see you return to council proceedings, and we hope that relations between humanity and the elder species can continue in a spirit of mutual cooperation." Elena looked up from her documents with that same gentle smile. "Of course, matriarch. Humanity values our place in the galactic community, and we look forward to working with all of you on matters of shared concern." She paused and tilted her head slightly. "Was there something specific you wished to discuss?" The matriarch hesitated, and Vexal realized he had never seen her hesitate before in all the centuries she had served on the council. "We simply wish to understand," she said at last, "why you never revealed your true capabilities during your time among us. Why you allowed us to believe you were something other than what you are." Elena considered the question for a long moment before answering. "Would you have trusted us if we had?" Silence filled the chamber. "We came to you as newcomers to the galactic stage," Elena continued in a voice that was soft but carried clearly through the vast space. "A young species seeking acceptance among civilizations far older and more experienced than our own. And we knew how we would be perceived if we arrived displaying the full extent of our nature." She folded her hands on the table before her. "We know what we are. Matriarch, we have always known, and we did not need the galaxy to remind us." High Arbiter Vaughn shifted uncomfortably in his seat and asked what exactly humanity believed itself to be. Elena turned to look at him with eyes that were warm on the surface but held depths of something much colder beneath. "We come from a world that tried to kill us every day for millions of years," she said. "Ice ages that froze our ancestors to death, predators that hunted us in the dark, diseases that swept through our populations like fire through dry grass. And through all of it, we survived because we learned to be very good at one thing." She paused. "Violence." The word hung in the air like a blade. "We fought predators larger and stronger than ourselves and drove them to extinction. We fought each other in wars that burned entire continents. We split the atom and built weapons capable of sterilizing our entire planet. We came so close to destroying ourselves so many times that we lost count. And through it all, we kept getting better at killing because that was what kept us alive." Elena's smile never wavered. "Civil mode is not weakness, Arbiter. It is a promise we made to ourselves after we finally realized what we had become. A covenant to choose kindness over cruelty whenever possible, to seek cooperation instead of conquest, to use our words before our weapons." She looked around the chamber at the representatives of species who had ruled the stars for millennia. "We smile because the alternative is so much worse. We compromise because forcing our will on others would be too easy. We absorb insults and indignities because responding to them, the way our instincts the man would leave nothing but ashes. That's all. Found himself unable to look away from her gentle face. The Creth forgot what we are, Elena continued. They saw our kindness and mistook it for inability. They took our people and laughed at our restraint. And so we had to remind them that apex predators do not stop being predators simply because they choose to wear suits and negotiate trade agreements. She spread her hands in a gesture of openness. We would prefer not to remind anyone else. No one responded. The message was clear. Humanity would continue to smile and compromise and do the difficult work that no other species wanted to do. And in exchange, the galaxy would treat them with the respect due to a civilization that could end any conflict it chose to engage in. It was not a threat because humans did not make threats. It was simply an understanding, wordless and permanent, and built on the memory of 11 days that had changed everything. From that day forward, the Council treated humanity differently. When conflicts arose between other species, everyone quietly hoped the humans would volunteer to mediate because humanity in civil mode made excellent peacemakers. When younger civilizations grew aggressive and threatened war, the Council would suggest they consult with human diplomats first. And somehow those consultations always seemed to result in peaceful resolutions. And when representatives of the elder species passed Ambassador Vasquez in the corridors of the council chamber, they no longer spat at her or mocked her or treated her as something beneath their notice. They smiled back at her and spoke in soft voices and made certain never to give her reason to stop smiling, because they had seen what happened when humanity stopped being civil, and none of them, not one single being in all the vast reaches of the galaxy, wanted to see it ever again. The humans went back to being gentle and kind and patient. The wolves put their masks back on and pretended to be sheep. And everyone agreed to forget that the masks had ever slipped, everyone except Dexal, who watched Elena Vasquez smile at a passing diplomat and thought to himself that forgetting would be the most dangerous thing any of them could do. He would remember. He would make certain that everyone remembered, because somewhere behind those warm human eyes, something ancient and terrible was waiting, and it was always watching.